Disney lied. The evil truth about Snow White. The coffin, the shoes, the lie. She doesn't scream. She can't. The iron shoes burn through skin and the queen staggers, forced to dance while the wedding crowd watches. Each step is a sentence. She collapses, smoke rising, judgment sealed by heat and spectacle. Smashed to silence, a glass coffin in the forest, a child with skin like snow, lips like blood, hair like ebony, everyone calling her a princess while she doesn't breathe. Here's the lie, Disney's kiss, the tidy romance, the softened edges. The Brothers Grimm wrote cannibalism, child abuse, and corpse obsession into a story we hand to kids. To understand how we got here, we rewind to a window, a needle, and envy. Chapter 1, Blood on Snow, a birth made for envy. It starts with a window in winter. A queen sits sewing in a frame of black ebony, snow falling outside, the world hushed by cold. She pricks her finger. 3 drops land on the snow, bright and red and impossible to ignore. She stares and the thought comes fast and smooth. A child with skin white as that snow, lips red as that blood, hair black as that ebony. A wish spoken like a spell, and a standard set before the child has breath. The girl is named for what she looks like, not who she is. Snow White isn't a person yet, she's an aesthetic. The wish fixes beauty as destiny, and that's the trap. Beauty isn't a prize here, it's a target painted on a small body, bright enough to be seen by anyone who wants to own it or erase it. The first queen dies early and the story doesn't linger on her. That's a choice with weight. The mother vanishes and a new queen arrives carrying a mirror that doesn't just reflect, it ranks. Ask it a simple question and it tells a brutal truth. Who's the fairest? Not kindest, not wisest, not bravest. Fairest. That single metric becomes law in the house and by extension in the world the tale builds. The mirror is a judge that never tires and never compromises. It rewards surveillance. Check again, ask again, compare again. It's an early blueprint for the validation loop, compulsion reinforced by intermittent reward, the same schedule that makes slot machines and social feeds addictive. Now remember, in early versions, Snow White is a child, often 7, not a blushing teenager, not a marriageable maiden. A child who plays and cleans and listens to rules, whose beauty is announced to a woman who's built her identity around being the fairest. That's the collision course. Envy here isn't a mood, it's a system running on scarcity. If the girl is fairest, the queen is. If the queen isn't, she loses power she believes is hers by right. Psychologically, that's social comparison turned into policy, status anxiety weaponized by an external metric. The mirror doesn't lie, and it doesn't flatter forever. The stakes shift from social to mortal the moment the mirror answers Snow White. A child becomes a rival, and rivalry becomes a death sentence. Under that logic, care can't survive. The new queen's vanity isn't just a character flaw, it's a worldview that turns a 7-year-old into a threat. What follows, orders, hunts, organs, ovens, springs from that single recalibration. Beauty as a zero-sum contest, controlled by an oracle on the wall. Get this, the girl's name keeps the standard visible every time someone speaks to her. Snow White, set the table. Snow White, don't open the door. The name repeats the target. And because tales teach by pattern, the pattern here is unavoidable. Women measured against women, girls absorbed into that measurement before they can imagine opting out. The mother's death removes protection. The stepmother's mirror removes ambiguity. There's no space left where beauty isn't being watched. Small details make the future feel inevitable. The ebony window suggests wealth and polish. The embroidery tells you this queen is domestic and delicate but still bleeds. The snow's purity underlines the fantasy of flawless skin. The red drop makes you think of blood as both life and danger. These aren't random props, they're a code. When the wish is granted, the code hardens into fate. A king doesn't shield, a court doesn't intervene, and a town doesn't speak. The mirror's verdict sets the cultural weather, and everyone lives under it. From a child's perspective, think about how quickly the ground shifts. You're 7. You hold a broom that's too big. You're trying to do things right. You're told to be quiet, to be good, to be neat. Then a woman looks at you the way a hawk looks at a rabbit. You haven't done anything. You exist, and that's the problem. That's how hypervigilance starts in kids, scanning faces for danger because the rules keep moving. The story makes you feel the wrongness without explaining it, because explanations would break the spell. Fairy tales work by making the inexplicable feel ordinary, then letting the horror emerge from daily life. Meanwhile, the mirror trains the queen to ask for external validation, and that's the addiction. What nobody knows yet is how far she'll go to keep the answer she wants. It won't be enough to hide the girl or cut her hair. It won't be enough to isolate her. The system demands elimination. And because the tale is interested in ritualized power, the elimination will come with proof. Organs, cooked and consumed, as if youth and beauty can be absorbed like a tonic. Before we get there, hold on to the setup. A wish sets a standard, a name fixes an identity, a mother disappears, a mirror enforces a rule, and a child becomes a rival. Beauty isn't just visible, it's verified. That turns envy into policy. The mirror doesn't lie, and it doesn't flatter forever. Chapter 2, The Mirror's Verdict, Seeds of Murder. While that winter wish still hangs in the air, the house learns a new ritual. The woman steps to the wall and asks a question she already knows by heart. Mirror, mirror on the wall, who's the fairest of them all? It's not conversation, it's confession. The mirror is blunt. It tallies, it ranks, it names. For a while it answers in the queen's favor. Vanity is fed, order feels intact, and the rhythm is soothing. Ask, hear yes, breathe easier. Then something else happens in the halls, mostly invisible to the adults. A child grows. Snow White's face settles into the exact symmetry the wish demanded, the kind that draws eyes whether she wants it or not. From the queen's perspective, this isn't growth, it's encroachment. The mirror, built to reinforce dominance, starts measuring a competitor the queen never planned for. When the question comes one morning, the mirror doesn't bend. You, my queen, are fair, yet Snow White is 1,000 times fairer. The wording matters. It's not a tie, it's obliteration. This is the moment everything changes. The response hits like a verdict and a prophecy. If fairness is the currency of safety and status, the queen just lost her fortune to a child. The tale doesn't give us her inner monologue, it gives us the consequences. Her face hardens. Rage doesn't flare and cool, it calcifies. Envy becomes administration. Cognitive dissonance does the rest. She can't be fairest and lose to a child, so the mind resolves the tension by redefining murder as maintenance. The queen moves from self-measurement to removal of the obstacle, because the system she built won't let her coexist with a rival. Unknown to the court, across town, a different logic is quietly preparing, the logistics of murder. She calls for the Huntsman. He's a man used to dealing death to animals, not children. He arrives expecting orders about game. He receives a command that turns his craft into a crime. Take the girl into the forest. Kill her. Bring me her lungs and liver. There's no metaphor left. The queen wants organs as proof, but also as harvest. In the Grimm's telling, she plans to eat them. The kitchen will sanctify the act. The dinner will seal it. Let's pause on that demand. In a world obsessed with youth, consuming the organs reads like ritualized theft. Take what makes her vital, swallow it, become it. It's power through literal incorporation. Cannibalism here isn't just horror, it's ideology. The queen believes beauty can be transferred by digestion, that the girl's body is both rival and resource. That's magical thinking with a narcissistic core. Other people exist to regulate my self-image. The mirror's measurement feeds hunger. The order gives the hunger rules. From the huntsman's perspective, the stakes are personal. If he refuses, he risks his life. If he obeys, he becomes the blade that breaks the last boundary left around a child. Fear and conscience grind against each other while he stands before a woman who can have him executed. The tale stresses his hesitation without calling it bravery. He's not a hero yet. He's a man trapped between terror and pity. Morally, he's battling obedience to authority versus harm minimization, the milligram problem in Boots. The knife is heavy. The forest awaits. Meanwhile, something else is happening that nobody names. The mirror has reprogrammed the household. Every servant understands that beauty is surveillance, that the queen's mood depends on an answer none of them can control. The huntsman carries that pressure into the trees. The farther they walk, the louder his thoughts get. Snow White, still trusting enough to follow directions, doesn't understand she's being led to her death. The imbalance is suffocating. A woman in a palace speaks one sentence. A child in a forest pays with her life. What nobody knew at the time is how this first plan plants the pattern for everything that follows. The queen's strategy is simple. Outsource the killing, consume the proof, ask the mirror again. If the mirror approves, the system stabilizes. If it doesn't, escalation begins. The mirror won't lie and the queen won't stop. That's the engine of the story. A question, an answer, a new cruelty. Back in the palace, the kitchen is already cast as a second throne room. Pots boil, knives glint, and the space that should sustain life becomes an altar. The queen imagines tasting victory. The huntsman imagines holding out the organs. Snow White imagines home. Only one of those futures will survive the walk into the trees. The knife doesn't fall, but the forest opens its mouth. Chapter 3, The Huntsman's Choice, Meat for a Monster. They leave the path when the trees start leaning in. The huntsman knows where sound gets swallowed and where footprints confuse themselves. Snow White, small and trying to keep up, holds her breath when twigs snap. He's brought knives for skinning, cord for tying, and a lie he hasn't learned to tell himself yet. She looks up with a question she doesn't ask. He stares past her, toward a trunk scarred by lightning, and tries to imagine following orders without seeing her face. Stakes don't announce themselves, they tighten. If he kills her, the queen eats proof and the mirror might hum again. If he spares her, the queen will smell defiance like smoke. He's not deciding between good and evil in a chapel. He's choosing between a child's throat and his own. The forest watches both. When he takes her by the shoulders, his hands remember the weight of deer 1 minute before death. She looks like neither prey nor threat, just a girl wearing a name that makes grown women lose sleep. Here, where the story does something brutal and honest. It lets mercy arrive as fear breaks. He raises the knife and the girl drops to her knees, begging, not with eloquence, with the grammar of a 7-year-old, "Please don't kill me." He hears it and something unclenches. He's not noble, he's human. The knife stays in his hand, but its purpose fractures. He points toward shadows thick enough to hide a child and says the most useful sentence of his life: "Run." Mercy needs a plan to survive. His is improvised and bloody. Psychologically, he performs a quick reframing, depersonalize the proof to save the person, so he can act without freezing. A boar blunders through brush a few yards off, snorting like it owns the ground. He lunges, and everything he's good at takes over: strike, dodge, finish. The animal goes down wild and hard, and the forest goes quiet in that stunned way a body brings. He carves out lungs and liver with hands that know the quick path between blade and meat. In this tale, the kitchen is where violence gets blessed, and he's preparing sacraments the queen will recognize. Snow White is gone by the time he looks up. Good. He smears her name off the scene with boar's blood and wraps the organs like rare gifts. For all his skill, he's shaken by how easy the substitution is. The queen's ritual never asked for a face, only parts and flavor. That's the moral rot sitting under the order. When you reduce a person to proof, any flesh will do. He thinks about that while tying knots and wiping the blade clean. Back at the castle, the lie enters through the kitchen door. The queen doesn't send the organs to a laboratory. She sends them to the cook. Salt them and boil them, some versions say. Others have her frying them with pepper and eating them herself. Either way, the point is the same. Food is violence written in coarse and seasoning. The kitchen becomes a crime scene that the table disguises. She lifts the dish to her mouth and consumes what she believes is a child swallowing youth like a cure. What nobody in that room knows is how the lie distorts the queen more than it protects the girl. The false proof doesn't calm her, it certifies her power. She thinks she's eaten victory. That confidence will license 3 more attempts, each closer, each more intimate. The huntsman's mercy buys time, but it also hardens the queen's belief that she can take and never be denied. The mirror will correct that later. For now, she dines and smiles, and Salt sits where a conscience should be. Meanwhile, in the forest, survival is practical and humiliating. Snow White is hungry immediately. The protection of the palace evaporates into branches and cold air, and the word "run" keeps echoing. She doesn't know how far away safety is, only that it isn't behind her. She drinks from a stream with her hands, scratches her palms on bark, and moves toward the first sign of order she can find: a house. Before we reach that door, stay with the huntsman for 1 more beat. He returns to his quarters not as a hero, but as a man who's now a secret. He has to carry himself like someone who followed orders, speak with empty ease when guards joke about the queen's mood, and sleep under the weight of a kindness that could get him killed. The tale doesn't reward him with recognition. It gives him silence and a heartbeat he has to keep steady. Here's the twist the queen doesn't plan for. It's easier to swap organs than to kill the story. The act of cooking turns the proof into a private meal, but the mirror is a public auditor. When she asks it later, it won't care about her full stomach. It will care about what breath still moves through trees. Those lungs she thought she consumed aren't singing in her chest. They're hiding under pine needles and will soon be breathing in a room built for 7. Food as violence lingers because it makes power intimate. You don't just defeat an enemy, you digest them, erase their separateness, claim them as fuel. That's why this detail matters. The queen doesn't want Snow White gone. She wants her inside her, transformed into the queen's own beauty. That hunger carries a logic that will guide every disguise she puts on later: lace to tighten the body, a comb to touch the scalp, an apple to enter the mouth. Each attempt brings the attack closer to the self. The stakes are locked now. A child is alive because a man chose pity over obedience. A queen is certain she's safe because her dinner lied to her. And somewhere between palace and pines, a set of rules waits behind a small door. Alone and starving, the girl is about to meet 7 conditions. Chapter 4. The house of rules, servitude for safety. The house looks wrong at first because it looks right. After a day of running through a forest that has no edges, Snow White finds a door small enough to promise order. Inside, everything is arranged by sevens. 7 plates, 7 cups, 7 knives, 7 little chairs. Beds in a row, quilts tucked precisely. It's tidy the way a mind gets tidy from routine, not comfort. She breathes differently as soon as she steps over the threshold, like the room itself enforces a rhythm. Hunger writes the first paragraph of her new life. She nibbles bread, sips from each cup, takes a bite here, a bite there, careful not to empty any one plate. Even starving, she tries to be fair. That detail matters. The story keeps reminding us she's a child who wants to do things right, even when nobody's watching. When fatigue reaches past her ribs, she tests the beds. The first is too long, the next too short, until one fits like it was expecting her. She sleeps hard and small, an intruder who thinks she's invisible. Unknown to her, the owners walk in at dusk, bringing the rhythm with them. The dwarfs are miners, men whose bodies have adapted to tunnels and clocks and work that wears the bones. They don't appear as clowns here. They count because counting keeps you safe in the dark. Who sipped from my cup? Who ate from my plate? Who sat in my chair? Who put their head on my pillow? The repetition is a spell against chaos. When they find her, the spell breaks and then reshapes. She doesn't look like a thief or a threat. She looks like a lost child. From their perspective, the stakes are practical. A stranger in a house that's engineered for survival is a risk, but the story wants a transaction, not charity. After the initial shock melts, they offer shelter with terms. You can stay if you keep house for us, cook, make the beds, wash, sew, knit, and keep everything neat and clean. It lands like relief and a leash at once, servitude for safety. She nods because the alternative is the forest's open mouth. Here, S where the tale turns domestic labor into a contract you can feel. She wakes before them, stirs pots, lays out bread, brushes crumbs into her palm like they're evidence. She stacks plates back into sevens, restores chairs to their exact angles. The house tells her who to be, small, useful, quiet. In exchange, she gets what a child needs most, predictability. Routine reduces anxiety by shrinking uncertainty. It also trains compliance. There's food, a bed, voices that return each evening. The price is obedience. The reward is not being alone. They don't just set chores. They set boundaries that sound like care and operate like alarms. Don't open the door to anyone. Don't talk to strangers when we're not here. Don't let anyone in no matter how they ask. The rules arrive as protection against the queen's power, but they also train her body to freeze at a knock. It's prevention that seeds panic. That's learned helplessness creeping in. Safety depends on passivity. Meanwhile, something else is happening. The queen's lie has taught her confidence, and confidence breeds persistence. From a child's angle, the chores reduce fear. Tasks fill the day. She hums a little and the house hums back. But the warnings sit in the corners like shadows. The dwarfs know the mirror exists even if they've never seen it. They understand that beauty has made her a target and that the attack will likely arrive politely. That's why the rules emphasize the door. Evil won't crash it. It'll knock and offer something helpful. The story is honest about exploitation without making a speech. Snow White is too young to negotiate terms. She does the labor because it buys safety. The dwarfs aren't villains. They're practical men whose survival depends on a tidy house and a steady routine. The arrangement is stark. Your body keeps our home clean. Our home keeps your body alive. In a world where the queen's hunger turns kitchens into crime scenes, this kitchen becomes a chapel. Bread is proof of care. Soup is proof of time, and both are tokens traded for protection. Every night they repeat the warnings, variations on the same theme. Don't open the door. Don't take anything from anyone. Don't let yourself be touched through kindness. It's a hard lesson because the queen will weaponize exactly what a child wants: approval, pretty things, motherly attention. The dwarfs sense that. They aren't teachers, they're guards. Their voices are gritty from dust, their hands scarred from work, and their caution comes from counting losses we don't hear about. What nobody knows yet is how the house itself will become a trap. By anchoring her to rules and rhythms, it makes her predictable. She moves to windows at the same times, smooths quilts the same way, steps to the door when she hears a certain kind of voice. The queen will exploit that predictability by shifting shape, arriving as what safety sounds like. The boundary is in place, but boundaries depend on a child remembering fear while someone smiles. Meanwhile, the mirror still hangs back at the palace, a device that keeps score no matter what dwarfs decide or children promise. The queen will ask again soon. When the answer comes back wrong, she'll change tactics. Outsourcing the killing failed. Intimacy will have to do. Lace to wrap around ribs. A comb that slips teeth into scalp. an apple that travels the shortest route from outside to inside. For now, Snow White stacks bowls into a neat tower and watches dust float in a beam of light. The house feels safe because it's clean. The deal feels fair because everyone eats. The warnings feel strong because they're spoken with certainty. Then a knock lands on the wood, soft, maternal, patient. The first knock sounds like motherly advice and tightens like a noose. Chapter 5, 3 Murders, 1 Mother, Attempt 1, The Bodice. While that gentle knock lingers, the door opens a crack to a voice that sounds like help wearing a shawl. A peddler woman stands outside with laces and trimmings, the kind of small luxury that makes a hard day feel softer. Her basket looks harmless. Her smile looks practiced. She speaks like someone's aunt, compliments first, questions second. Aren't you a tidy little housekeeper? Aren't you a pretty little thing? The words slide past the rules because they sound like care. Snow White hesitates, then forgets to. She craves approval like any child, and the peddler offers it in measured teaspoons. The lace glints. It's a bodice lace, long and sleek, promising neatness, promising the shape the world says is proper. The dwarfs' warnings were clear, but warnings fade when something beautiful is held up to your throat and called a gift. She steps into the light. The door opens wider. The deal is already made. From the queen's perspective, because yes, it's her in disguise, the plan is elegant. Outsourcing failed. Intimacy will kill cleanly. She can't stab without noise. She can't poison without certainty. But she can help. She can tidy. She can lace. She can touch ribs and call it teaching. She pulls the bodice around Snow White's small frame and draws the new lace through, quick and competent, like she's done this 100 times for girls who wanted to be seen as perfect. Stakes tighten with each tug. There's vanity here, but it's weaponized. The lesson isn't subtle. Beauty standards constrict. The queen yanks the lace far past comfort, past neatness, past breath. The child's chest shrinks under the pressure, a body turned into a silhouette to please someone else's eye. She gasps once, maybe twice. Then there's no sound at all. The queen ties a hard knot at the back and steps away to admire the neatness she's made of a life. Action collapses into stillness. Snow White's face goes the wrong kind of white. Her lips lose their red. She slumps to the floor in a heap that looks like sleep if you refuse to look closely. The queen checks her work the way a tailor checks seams, fingers along the ribs, a satisfied nod. No blood, no mess, just a girl who can't breathe. Murder as grooming. She leaves as quietly as she came, the basket light again, the door closing on silent. Meanwhile, hours stretch. The dwarfs return heavy with dust and routine, counting chairs, counting dishes, counting breaths that should answer their calls. They find her. From their perspective, the shock is practical before it's poetic. Bodice too tight, body too still. They don't pray, they cut. A knife slides through the laces. Air rushes in like a lost friend. Snow White's chest rises awkwardly, then properly. She coughs, moans, returns in confusion and embarrassment, like someone waking from a dream she didn't choose. Impact hits several rooms at once. In the forest house, the incident moves rules from abstract to carved in bone. Don't open the door is no longer advice, it's survival. The dwarfs' eyes harden with a kind of love that looks like anger. They tell her again, don't speak to anyone, don't let anyone in, not for laces, not for ribbons, not for anything that touches your body. The warning is specific because the attack was specific. An instrument of beauty became a noose. Back in the palace, the queen hears the mirror's answer and feels rage reorganize her plans. The glass doesn't congratulate her. It names the truth she failed to strangle. Snow White lives and she's still fairer. The bodice attempt did more than fail. It taught the queen who she's dealing with. The girl can be revived if the harm sits outside the body. The next method will have to go deeper, under hair, under skin. Here's the part that sticks. Trust becomes the weapon and the battlefield is the body. The queen doesn't need force when culture has trained a child to seek prettiness and praise. The bodice isn't random. It's a lesson girls learn with breath as tuition. Tighter is better, neatness is virtue, discomfort is normal. That's grooming logic. Normalize harm by packaging it as improvement. The tale translates that lesson into assault and shows the cost in seconds of lost air. Snow White nods through tears and fear, promising to obey, but vulnerability doesn't vanish because you've learned a rule once. The queen learned too. Disguise worked. Flattery worked. The door opened. Next time she won't need laces. The comb gleams in her mind already, small and beautiful, ready to touch scalp and switch off breath in a way knives can't fix. Chapter 6, Attempt 2, The Poisoned Comb. 3 days later, while that warning still aches in her ribs, a different knock comes, lighter, friendlier, the sound of someone who sells small joys. At the window, a woman's face appears under a scarf, cheeks flushed from walking, basket brimming with bright wares. Not laces this time, trinkets, pins, a comb that catches the light like it's made of mourning. The voice is new, the rhythm practiced. Don't worry, child, no laces today. Only pretty things to make you smile. Snow White answers through the window at first, trying to hold the rule like a shield. The peddler laughs softly, not unkindly, just amused. You don't have to open the door to look, dear. See, she lifts the comb higher, teeth fine, and even a little flower carved into the spine. The color suits Snow White's hair so perfectly that the compliment feels inevitable. It would be a shame, the woman says, for a girl so fair to go untidy. No touching, just look, that's how it starts. From the queen's perspective, and it's her again, of course, the adjustment is surgical. The bodice taught her where breath can be restored. This time the harm will ride in on beauty and sit on the skin like a charm. Contact poison is the plan, disguise the delivery. A comb is intimacy without threat. Mothers comb hair, friends comb hair. The act feels like care. She waits for curiosity to soften the child's caution. Snow White tries to resist. She repeats the dwarf's warning, and it sounds strong until it meets the comb's logic. It's not a gift, the woman says, just a touch to see if it suits you. One quick fix to those stray hairs. The girl turns her head enough to imagine it, order restored at the crown, a tiny proof that she's still someone who can be made lovely in a house meant for work. She unlatches the window, not the door, a compromise. That's how rules break, by inches. The comb slides across the sill, light as a moth. The queen's hand follows, confident and gentle, like a nurse checking a pulse. It's caregiving theater, perform warmth to bypass defenses, classic predatory social engineering. One stroke and the teeth nestle into dark hair. Another and the poison kisses scalp. The effect is immediate and obscene in its neatness. Snow White's body folds the way sleep folds, quickly, quietly, with no struggle worth a shout. Her eyes roll back to white. Her knees give out. The comb holds fast, like it grew there. Action collapses again, this time without knots to cut. The queen watches her work with the same satisfied stillness, then withdraws with the comb still planted, leaving no mess, no sign beyond a child slumped by a window. She walks away smiling because she's learned the rhythm of this house. The dwarfs will return, but not in time. The mirror will answer differently tonight. She imagines the glass praising her. While that was happening in the clearing, the miners' day drags. Dust in their throats, weight in their shoulders, they count hours the way they count gems carefully. At the threshold, they sense wrongness the way animals do, a silence that doesn't fit the room's usual size. They call her name, and the name doesn't answer. They find her by the light, head tilted, a comb glinting where life should be warm. From their perspective, the lesson is encoded in the object. No constriction to loosen, no rope to slice. The thread is on her body, not around it. They don't waste time. Fingers dig into hair, fight the teeth, yank hard enough to tear. The comb rips free with strands caught between tines. Breath returns in a ragged rush. Snow White coughs like she's swallowing fire back down. Color stutters into her face. The dwarfs curse the door, the window, the world that keeps teaching predators to arrive as friend. Impact lands heavier this time because the line between life and death shrank to the width of a hair. The house tightens its rules. No door, no window, no talking through cracks or screens, no looking at wares, no taking gifts, no objects on your body that you didn't have yesterday. The specificity isn't paranoia, it's a map of how harm travels. Behaviorally, they're building a threat model. The queen is adapting, so must they. Back at the palace, the queen's confidence meets the mirror's refusal like water hitting iron. She asks, and the answer refuses to bend. Snow White lives, and she's still fairer. The comb attempt did more than fail. It taught the queen what kind of harm works and what kind demands precision. If contact can be removed, breath can be restored. If poison goes inside, the dwarf's hands won't help. She stares into glass and feels hunger harden into patience. Here, S where the tail sharpens its point. The object isn't random. Hair is identity. The comb is culture. Grooming becomes a delivery system, and consent gets tricked through flattery. That's why this attempt cuts close. It shows how easily a child's desire to be tended turns into an opening. The dwarfs see it and stack the warning higher. Snow White hears it and means to obey. But vulnerability has its own gravity, and the queen becomes more fluent every time she fails. What nobody knows at the table that night is how neatly the next plan is forming. The weapon will be food because food moves past skin without asking. The lesson will come baked in, sweet, red, and fatal. Chapter 7, Attempt 3, The Poisoned Apple. The mirror refuses her again, and the queen sits with rage long enough to turn it into craft. Lace failed because air can be cut free. The comb failed because poison on skin can be pulled out, so she thinks like a cook, not a killer. What goes inside can't be yanked back. The plan forms with the clarity of a recipe. Take something every child trusts, make it beautiful, load it with death. She mixes, measures, whispers the kind of words this tale keeps off stage. Then she picks up an apple so perfect it looks painted. Here's the trick that makes it irresistible and safe-looking at once. She cuts the fruit cleanly in half and treats the halves differently. One side she leaves harmless. The other she stains red and infuses with poison. When she fits them back together, the seam hides like a secret. White side for her, red side for the girl. Trust engineered into color. Disguise comes next, not as a mother this time, but as a farmer's wife, apron dusty, a basket swaying with ordinary promise. She walks to the dwarf's house with the patience of someone who knows the door won't open and doesn't need it to. Snow White hears the knock and calls back the rule. No door, no gifts, no wares. The queen nods like she understands and pivots into a new angle. Then take a bite through the window so you'll know it's safe. Stakes don't shout, they smile. Food is the oldest contract. You eat what someone offers, and for a moment you share peace. The queen bites the white side, chews, swallows, eyes bright with fake reassurance. Nothing happens. The test works by design. Snow White watches, hunger and politeness tugging at the rule. One bite, she thinks, to be kind to a harmless old woman, to prove to herself she can be both obedient and human. She leans forward. The red side meets her mouth. Action condenses to a single instant. The skin breaks with a soft snap. Juice touches her tongue. A poison chunk dislodges, slides, lodges again deeper, just at the gate where breath and swallow decide. Her body chooses wrong because it can't choose at all. The world cuts to black. There's no cry this time, no hands clawing at laces, no comb to rip free. She drops where she stands, apple rolling, a bright smear on the floor that looks like a smile if you're cruel. The queen watches the collapse with a calm she's earned through failure. She doesn't linger. She doesn't need to. The method went inside. That means nothing in the dwarf's toolkit can fix it. She walks away certain, and for once the certainty isn't a delusion. Back at the palace, the mirror will soon match her. But in the house, a silence thicker than grief settles over plates she set that morning. Hours later, boots and pickaxes return to a scene that refuses their skill. From their perspective, the wrongness looks crueler because it's clean. No marks, no knots, no objects to blame, just a child laid out as if for a painting. They try anyway. They tilt her, press her chest, call her name until it loses meaning, open her mouth and look for something to pull. The apple sits like a secret in a place fingers can't safely reach. Breath doesn't return. Color doesn't obey. The dwarfs, used to rescuing her with action, meet a problem that only looks like death because it isn't fully won. Impact hits them in decisions, not words. Burial would erase the beauty that feels like all they have left of her, and they're not ready to surrender the one thing the world valued her for. So they build a coffin of glass with gold trim, craft surrounding a child like a reliquary. They lay her inside with a ribbon name, letters clear enough for strangers to read. Then they carry her into the forest and set her on a stand where sun can find her and animals can watch and people can pass, look, and whisper. Public display turns a body into a spectacle the tale doesn't flinch from. She's a child, and she becomes a kind of landmark. Folks come and stare because grief can look like worship and worship can look like ownership. That's the crowd psychology of moral licensing. If it's framed as devotion, onlookers feel permitted to consume the sight. The dwarfs take turns keeping watch, treating her like a flame that mustn't go out. Days become seasons. Leaves redden, snow returns, and each cycle fixes her deeper in place. A life suspended becomes a story people tell nearby while they point. Meanwhile, the queen stands before her auditor and finally hears what she needed like oxygen. You are the fairest, no qualifiers, no 1,000 times. Just supremacy restored by what she believes is a perfect kill. The mirror's truth doesn't know about the glass box under trees, or if it does, it doesn't care. It measures the living, and Snow White's breath is gone. The queen smiles at herself, and the room holds. What nobody counts on is how death-like sleep draws footsteps. Hunters, woodcutters, travelers, and at last a prince, men whose lives lean toward taking and keeping, drift toward the shining coffin. They see a body that looks like a promise, unspoiled, silent, framed as an offering. The forest goes quiet when he circles it because stillness invites possession. He reads the name, reads the face, reads the invitation he thinks is written into beauty displayed without voice. The dwarfs guard and plead and explain, but the pressure of desire wrapped in rank wears them down. He doesn't ask to kiss, he asks to take, because he can't live without seeing her, he says, as if seeing were a need that outranks burial and rest. Eventually, against their own rules and their own grief, they let the coffin be lifted. That small surrender shifts weight and chance, and the world moves toward an accident that will undo the poison's hold. Chapter 8. A prince meets a corpse, love or possession. He comes into the clearing like someone who expects the world to pause for him, and in a way it already has. The glass coffin sits under a canopy of leaves that don't dare fall on it. 7 men standing around it like punctuation marks to a sentence none of them wanted to write. He reads the gold lettering, Snow White, and pretends the name tells him anything about the person inside. It doesn't. It tells him she's an image you can carry in your head, and if you're powerful enough, in your arms. From his perspective, the scene is already a story starring him. A beautiful maiden wronged by fate, preserved by loyalty, waiting for the right gaze to translate her back into life. It's parasocial desire in a crown, bonding to an image that can't answer back. He speaks softly, but not to her. How could he? To the dwarfs, asking questions that show he's cataloging a prize. How long has she lain here? Who watches? Does anyone own this? His eyes don't leave her face. Her stillness works on him like a challenge. Claim me without consent, because consent isn't part of this arrangement. The dwarfs answer with patience worn thin by months of guarding. She's dead, they say. She belongs to no one. She belongs to herself, which is the same as belonging to the world, which is the same as belonging to nobody powerful enough to protect her from desire. The prince nods like he understands, then proves he doesn't. He says the sentence that reveals the gap between romance and possession. I can't live without seeing her. Let me have the coffin. That line matters because it moves the focus from her to him. His need is the credential. Her silence becomes the permission. The dwarfs push back at first, out of grief and principle, but he leans on rank the way a man leans on a walking stick he never had to learn to use. He offers gold, offers favors, offers the illusion that taking her away honors her beauty. The argument isn't about burial. It's about where desire gets to live, in a forest watched by miners, or in a palace where one man can look without interruption. Stakes rise because the decision isn't about a coffin, it's about what beauty can demand from the living. If they refuse, they keep a vigil that never ends. If they accept, they surrender her image to someone who promises reverence and intends ownership. They choose badly and understandably at once. They relent. He orders servants to lift the coffin. The cords tighten around wood and glass, and the body inside stays still, as if agreeing to be moved. He doesn't kiss her. The Grimms don't give him magic lips. They give him appetite decorated as devotion. Psychologically, that's moral disengagement at work. Rename wanting as reverence to make it feel noble. He doesn't talk to her. He talks about her in front of her, through her. He tells his men to be careful, to carry her as if she were a relic, which is another way of saying as if she were an object sanctified by death. The dwarfs watch the procession leave and feel a kind of betrayal that doesn't have a word yet. Grief merged with complicity. Meanwhile, the forest recedes and the prince's world gathers around the coffin like a stage crew. He thinks ahead, where to place her, how to light the room, who to tell. He plans a future full of seeing, not meeting. He imagines the display, not the conversation. That's the pivot the story wants us to see. Desire divorced from the person, romance built on a body treated as permanent and compliant. Here's a micro-story that matters for how we read him. Before this day, he's probably had other treasures escorted to his halls, rare falcons, carved icons, a tapestry rescued from a ruined chapel. He learned early that possession feels like salvation. Bringing something home makes it yours, and making it yours makes the ache quiet down for a while. Snow White slots neatly into that habit, except she's not a thing, and the habit will show its teeth the second the story knocks it sideways. As they carry her, one servant stumbles on a root because boots designed for marble don't love dirt. The coffin tilts. Inside, the body shifts the way a doll shifts when gravity argues. There's a small sound, not magical, just bodily, a click or a wet hitch where throat meets apple and apple meets air. The prince hears it without knowing what he heard. The men freeze, then steady themselves, then move. He tells himself it was nothing because nothing is all he expects from her. Back in his head, the script keeps playing. He'll place her in a chamber where morning finds her face and he finds the morning. He'll invite friends to marvel at what he rescued from obscurity, and the marveling will reflect back on him. He'll kneel sometimes, as if praying, and call it love because love is what powerful men say it is when they surround themselves with the beautiful and the mute. Let's call this what it is without yelling, a romance edited to flatter the beholder. He's fallen for a construction, her arrangement, her stillness, the reassurance that she won't interrupt. The dwarfs meant well. He means well in his own mind. But meaning isn't the point. The point is who gets to define care when one person can't speak. Here's where it gets strange and honest at once. The story doesn't punish him yet. It doesn't call him out on the spot. It makes him carry the consequences of seeing beauty as a possession, and then when physics does what spells didn't, it will force him to meet a person instead of a picture. For now, the procession winds down a path that leads away from mourning and toward an accident that will knock his idea of love off its axis. A stumble, a shake, and breath snaps back. Chapter 9, The Accidental Awakening. No kiss, just physics. They don't carry lightly. 4 men take the corners, shoulders braced, eyes on the ground that keeps throwing up roots and stones. The dwarfs fade behind the trees until only the gold lettering glints between leaves. The prince walks close enough to see his reflection ghosted on the glass, practicing the gaze he'll live with. He isn't expecting movement. Nobody is. That's why the moment works. A strap slips on damp bark. One bearer stumbles, knee-knocking wood. The coffin jolts. Inside, gravity argues with arrangement. Snow White's head tilts, jaw loosens, and the wedge of apple that locked her breath shifts, scrapes, frees. It's not magic, it's physics. A wet cough explodes in the chamber like thunder, followed by a drag of air so rough it sounds like tearing cloth. Her chest heaves. Her eyes fight light. The men freeze, mid-stride, still holding weight. The prince blurts her name because he's built a week of private language around a stranger, and now the stranger answers. Snow White doesn't recognize the voice, the trees, the men, the glass, the sky. The last thing she remembers is sweetness cracking on her teeth and the world shutting like a book. The next thing is noise and faces and a room without walls. She flails once, palms pushing at the lid she didn't know existed, then gasps, then coughs again until her throat burns. From her perspective, this isn't a fairy tale return. It's a panic attack with spectators. Oxygen feels like a flood. Her hands shake because blood is returning to places it hasn't visited in too long. She sees the prince as a shape first, a man in fine fabric, eyes dilated wider than courtesy. She sees the bearers as blocks of color. She hears birds screaming and thinks it's inside her head. She can't stitch time together. The dwarfs, the apple, the knock. She tries to stand them up in a row and they keep falling. He rushes to the side of the coffin, which is to say he rushes toward the object he thought he owned and finds a person sitting up. His script shreds itself. He was going to display beauty. Now Beauty coughs spit onto her sleeve and looks at him with confusion that feels like accusation. He says something courtly out of habit, "My lady, you're safe," and the words hang stupid in the air. Safe compared to what? Compared to whom? She blinks, trying to decide whether that sentence belongs to her life. They lower the glass and struggle the lid off, fingers clumsy with surprise. Fresh air hits like a second awakening. Snow White crawls to the edge on her hands and knees because standing is for people whose legs remember their jobs. She retches once, a string of apple-tinted saliva dribbling onto the wood. The prince steps back an inch because he's never seen this part of miracles. Then he moves forward again because training tells him to claim the scene. Offer a hand, make an oath, name the future. He starts talking fast. He explains that he found her, that he loved her at once, that he begged to take her because not seeing her would hurt him more than any wound. The sentences are polished by rank and useless to her. She watches his mouth move and hears the meaning anyway. A man saw a body and made plans without asking. It's entitlement dressed as rescue. The dwarfs warned her about doors and combs and apples. They didn't prepare her for a prince who thinks wanting is a reason. Meanwhile, her body runs diagnostics. Fingers tingle, toes complain, heart thumps like it's catching up on work. The world comes back in layers. Leaf shadow, sweat smell, the scrape of wood on leather straps, the sting in her throat where the fruit sat. When she speaks, her voice surprises her. It's small and sandpapered, but it's hers. What happened, she asks, because that's the first sovereignty to return, the right to ask for context. One of the bearers answers without thinking, "We stumbled. It dislodged. That's simple. No kiss, no spell, no anointing. A misstep did what heroics didn't. The tale is clear about the mechanics because it wants the truth to sit heavy. Accidents undo harm as often as intention does, and sometimes better." The prince looks like someone who's been robbed of a narrative and handed a fact. He pivots fast. If there's no miracle to credit, he'll credit fate. He calls it destiny out loud, which is another way of saying he still wants what he wanted. He proposes marriage because proposals are what princes do when they need to stabilize a story that just slipped. He promises care, a castle, a life where she'll never fear apples or doors or combs again. He doesn't ask if she wants him. He asks if she'll come. Snow White doesn't swoon. She stares. She thinks about the dwarf's house with its counted bowls and their gentle nagging that saved her twice. She thinks about the queen's hands, clever and cruel, and the mirror that measured her into this nightmare. She thinks about waking in a parade she didn't approve. Then she thinks about safety, which has been a commodity since the forest closed around her. She nods, not because love has bloomed in a moment, but because survival keeps writing her lines. Impact ripples outward. The men exhale. The prince smiles like he's wrapped the scene back in silk. They turn toward a future that wasn't summoned by romance but by a jolt. The coffin, now empty, gleams anyway, a relic of an era that fixed another era. News travels the way news does, faster than carts, faster than reasons. Back at the palace, a woman with a mirror will soon ask her favorite question, and the answer will finally betray her. Chapter 10, The Wedding Trap. Queen walks into judgment. News outruns horses. By the time the prince's messengers finish rehearsing how to say miracle without admitting accident, invitations have already arrived at places that never get invited. The dwarfs receive theirs on a clean scrap of parchment, names spelled right, a line promising honor seats. The miners look at each other and shrug because weddings mean public rooms and public rooms mean witnesses, and witnesses might keep danger away. Snow White rides beside the prince, throat still tender, eyes scanning doorways like they might bite. Meanwhile, a palace dresses itself in confidence. Banners go up, kitchens roar, musicians tune for joy. The prince orders the hall arranged so light finds the bride before it finds anyone else. He wants proof that she's alive to be the centerpiece, as if brightness could erase the coffin's shadow. Snow White submits to fittings and pins with a patience that comes from wanting the next day to arrive without anyone knocking in disguise. She doesn't ask for glass shoes or bluebird. She asks for the dwarfs to stand where she can see them, a signal flag in a sea of silk. Across town, a woman wakes to a ritual that soothed her for years. Mirror, mirror on the wall, who's the fairest of them all? The glass answers with a name that once meant nothing and now means doom. The young queen, it says, Snow White. The words hit like a thrown stone. She doesn't believe them, not at first. She ate the proof. She watched the collapse. She heard yes from this very oracle. But the mirror doesn't flatter, and this time it's not offering 1,000 times comparison. It's announcing replacement. Rage burns through grief and lands on logistics. She needs to see the girl, and she needs to see her fail. When the invitation arrives, because cruelty enjoys efficiency, she reads it as a dare. Attend, it says, dress, smile, toast. She laughs, but not the kind that lifts a room, the kind that sharpens knives. Fine, she'll go. If Snow White lives, she'll stare at the life she shouldn't have. If Snow White doesn't, she'll collect the remains of her pride in a gold cup. The hall fills with bodies that mean nothing to the story and everything to the spectacle. Servants move like choreography. The dwarfs enter to a ripple of curiosity, small men from a small house now crossing a floor designed for giants. They take their places at the front, boots scrubbed, beards combed, faces set to stoic. When Snow White appears, the air shifts, not because she's the fairest, but because absence has turned into presence and the room recognizes a ghost it thought it had stored away. From Snow White's perspective, this is the hardest threshold. Doors open to laces and combs and apples. This one opens to applause. She steps through and feels sound hit her chest where poison once sat. She's wearing white because the story insists on it. She's breathing because a stumble rearranged her fate. She looks for the dwarfs, finds them, and lets her shoulders drop a fraction. Then she looks toward the entrance because rituals always contain risk, and risk is usually late. The queen enters like a lesson, every inch arranged. She believes in the magic of appearance the way some people believe in prayer. She takes 3 steps and sees the bride's face. Recognition detonates. The color drains from her expression without her consent. For a second, the whole hall goes quiet in her head. She calculates exits, allies, lies. Then she sees the mirror's truth standing upright, looking back, and the calculus collapses into panic. Protocol pins her in place long enough for the room to read her shock. Whispers travel. That's the woman who, no, it can't be, look at her eyes. Snow White's gaze doesn't flinch. She doesn't gloat. She doesn't speak. She doesn't need to. The prince nods to his steward, and the hall's temperature drops 10 degrees. Here comes the trap, sprung with ceremony. Iron glows in a brazier brought in under the polite cover of entertainment. 2 shoes sit in coals, heating until they turn cherry. The logic is medieval in its neatness. You loved heat when it cooked what you thought was a child. Dance now with the heat you made holy. It's retributive justice staged to recalibrate the crowd's moral emotions. Anger satisfied, fear warned, norms reset. The steward announces the punishment like he's reading a toast. The queen looks for mercy and finds faces that learned caution from her cruelty. Guards step forward, not roughly, but with the kind of duty that doesn't change its mind. From the crowd's perspective, justice feels like theater because theater is how power explains itself. Music starts something jaunty and wrong. The shoes come out of the coals trailing threads of flame. They're brought to her on a silver tray because this court understands the value of contrast. Rough punishment, fine presentation. The queen tries to pull rank, it dissolves. She tries to plead, the sound comes out thin. She tries to bolt, hands like walls close the space. They force her feet in. Skin meets metal and her body jerks like a puppet yanked by a bad puppeteer. She dances because the only other option is to fall and be pulled upright again. The spectacle coerces empathy through discomfort, pain made visible so the lesson sticks. The steps aren't graceful, they're stumbles disguised by rhythm. Sweat pours. The smell of burning hair and flesh crawls through velvet and perfume. People hold napkins to their faces and keep watching because watching is part of the sentence. Snow White watches too, face set, not out of glee but out of completion. The mirror taught her what the queen valued. The shoes teach the queen what the mirror measured. Impact isn't immediate. It never is. The queen staggers, legs buckling and straightening until the nerves can't translate command into motion. She collapses once, rises on reflex, collapses again, and stays down because muscle has fled. Smoke threads from the seams. The music stops. No one claps. The hall absorbs the end without cheering because the lesson has already written itself on everyone's skin. Public cruelty teaches faster than private harm, and this court wanted a curriculum. The dwarfs don't smile. They stand perfectly still, guardians at the edge of a victory that doesn't feel like relief. The prince breathes out and finds Snow White's hand and squeezes, because that's what people do when spectacle threatens to swallow meaning. Snow White squeezes back. Her eyes drift to the mirror in her mind, the one that calibrated her life. It didn't lie. It just measured the wrong thing for too long. With the queen gone, the tale should rest. But stories that train a culture don't end when the villain drops. They echo. They repeat in smaller rooms behind softer doors. The hall returns to bright conversation, to meat and song, to cups lifted high. Somewhere beyond the torches, a servant spreads ash where the brazier burned the floor, and nobody steps there for the rest of the night. Chapter 11, Mother or Stepmother. Versions, edits, and sanitizing. The wedding smoke hasn't cleared when the story starts editing itself. Here's the first cut that matters. In some early tellings, the jealous woman isn't a stepmother at all. She's Snow White's biological mother. A mother measuring her child as a rival is a horror too sharp for polite rooms, so later versions replace her with a stepmother, a figure already coded for suspicion. That swap turns a family tragedy into a cautionary tale about outsiders. It softens the blow while keeping the spectacle. From the child's point of view, the difference changes everything. If your mother wants you dead, the home is broken at the foundation. If a stepmother wants you dead, the danger feels imported, as if evil arrived with the second marriage certificate. The stepmother edit rescues the idea of the good hearth while preserving the thrill of a bad queen. It's moral laundering disguised as lineage. Meanwhile, other edits creep in, sanding edges until the tale fits the room. The cannibal feast, lungs and liver salted, cooked, eaten, doesn't survive family tables. It's implied here and there, then it's gone. The kitchen returns to soup and songs. The huntsman's boar substitution becomes a clever twist, not the hinge of a queen's ritual hunger. The point shifts from a woman swallowing youth to a woman fooled by sausage. That's a different lesson. Age moves too. The 7-year-old, small hands, chores done carefully, warnings repeated at bedtime, grows into a young woman with blush and waltz posture. Raising her age does more than make the romance palatable. It makes danger look like choice. A child opening a door feels like a failure of protection. A teenager opening a door can be framed as curiosity, stubbornness, or flirtation. Blame slides around more easily when the protagonist can be accused of wanting pretty things too much. Then there's the kiss, the most famous edit. In the Grimm's text, revival is a stumble, a cough, a chunk of apple forced out by a jolt. No lips, no spell. Later retellings attach a mouth to the miracle so desire can look redemptive instead of acquisitive. A man's love becomes the solvent that frees a woman from death-like sleep. That switch takes the story's uneasy question, why did he want a body he couldn't talk to, and answers it with chivalry. Silence becomes consent once a song played. This is how cultural memory works. Keyframes get repainted until they match what a generation needs to believe about itself. Mothers must be safe, so stepmothers carry the rot. Cannibalism must be unthinkable, so we cut the kitchen scene. Children mustn't be targeted, so we inflate the girl into a maiden who seems to participate in her fate. Possession must read as love, so we draft lips and call it destiny. Each change seems small. Together they rewire the story. What we gain is comfort. What we lose is clarity about how violence moves. A biological mother's envy exposes how beauty hierarchies can live inside families. A stepmother externalizes that envy, letting audiences keep faith in blood ties. Removing the organ feast erases how hunger for youth turns practical, even domestic. Cleaning the age makes the warnings feel less like a map for protecting children and more like a sermon about modesty. Adding a kiss reframes a transaction into a sacrament. laundering impulse into virtue. There's also the matter of the queen's punishment. Some versions keep the iron shoes, others replace them with exile, anonymity, or simple disappearance. Making the end less grotesque makes the moral sound less medieval, but it blunts the loop the tale built. The queen used heat to enact power, heat answers. When edits soften that, they also soften the story's commentary on spectacle and justice. The crowd's gaze becomes applause instead of accountability. You can feel the edits working on our shared memory. Ask a room what wakes Snow White, and most will say kiss. Ask what the queen wanted to eat, and they'll look queasy or puzzled. Ask how old the girl was, and they'll make her older without meaning to. The airbrush has done its job. The darker frame is still there under the paint, but you need light at the right angle to see it. Here's a small, telling shift. In early texts, the prince begs to take the coffin because he can't live without seeing her. In cleaned versions, he asks to honor her or to guard her. The verbs migrate from want to care. That migration isn't random, it's a strategy. Language moves possession into protection, and audiences move with it because protection is easier to like. The body in the box turns from trophy into shrine, and the man beside it becomes a guardian instead of a collector. None of these changes happen by accident. They follow pressure, parents wanting safer bedtime stories, publishers courting middle-class sensibilities, theaters chasing audiences who want love songs more than autopsies. Each tweak says more about us than about the story. When a culture edits a tale, it's really editing its mirror. It's choosing what to see, what to teach, what to hide. What did the Grimms actually publish, and why? Chapter 12. The Brothers Grimm, Collectors, Editors, Moralists. To understand why the dark parts survived on the page at all, we need to see who put them there. Jakob and Wilhelm Grimm weren't folklorists the way we picture them, tweed coats, tape recorders, neutral observers. They were young scholars in a fractured German-speaking world around 1812, building something bigger than bedtime tales, a cultural archive. Folk stories in their hands became bricks for a national house that didn't exist yet. They didn't roam village to village with notebooks catching tales fresh from firesides. Much of what became Kinder und Schneewittchen came from educated acquaintances, women in salons, middle-class friends, Huguenot descendants who told remembered stories already shaped by print and parlor. The folk were closer to the living room than the farmhouse. Even the language shows it. French tale types slide into German syntax, then get sanded to sound authentically rustic. Authenticity was a goal, not a baseline. When the first edition dropped in 1812, it arrived lean and mean. Schneewittchen in that volume is colder, sharper, less cushioned by sentiment. Violence is not coy, organs are named, punishments don't blink. The prose is quick, bone-showing, a style that lets horror and logic stand side by side without apology. It reads like a handoff from oral economy. What matters stays, decoration goes. Then something else happens. Audience pressure and moral ambition start editing the archive. Later editions shift tone without dropping brutality. Wilhelm, the more stylistic brother, keeps revising, softening phrases, heightening piety, clarifying proper behavior, so the stories double as instruction manuals for a burgeoning bourgeois household. Piety leans in. Obedience gets rewarded more clearly. Mothers get nicer and stepmothers carry the bile. The queen stays wicked, but the text keeps nudging readers toward good child conduct. Be diligent, heed warnings, accept your place. They add frames, too. Prefaces grow sermons about the value of old tales and the purity of childhood, even as the content keeps iron shoes hot. That's the Grimm's paradox, protective rhetoric around punitive scenes. It's not hypocrisy, it's a strategy. Pain teaches. Fear guards the boundary. If a child imagines a door that must not open, the lesson has landed. In that worldview, the Bodice, comb, and Apollon grotesque flourishes. They're case studies in how temptation and trust get you killed. Meanwhile, they curate. Variants arrive, regional, familial, contradictory. The brothers merge, split, and prune, choosing the version that best delivers a moral geometry they trust. In early materials, a jealous mother flickers. In print, a stepmother hardens. The edit isn't random. It aligns with a domestic ideal where true mothers nurture and strangers corrupt. This preserves the hearth and isolates malice. A tidy map for middle-class readers raising children under watchful portraits of saints and princes. The project, in plain terms, is cultural nation-building through selective memory. Germany isn't a nation yet. It's a patchwork of states and dialects. Common stories can feel like a shared roof. The Grimms chase that feeling, filing off foreign names, emphasizing German settings, rooting tales in woods and villages that feel local even when the plot traveled from Italy, France, or further east. They aren't lying, they're aligning. Folklore, for them, is a spine to grow a body around. Compare that to Disney a century later. Hollywood doesn't collect, it consolidates for mass delight. Where the Grimms tighten morals and retain menace, Disney bleaches menace and inflates mood. The brothers maintain the iron shoes, Disney swaps them for a fall. The brothers keep the accidental awakening, Disney crowns it with a kiss. But the impulse reshaped the story to serve a cultural goal, matches. The Grimms aim for disciplined citizens, Disney aims for paying families. Same machine, different product. Different reward schedules, same behavior shaping. There's also the matter of religion. As revisions stack, church-friendly tones creep in gratitude, providence, virtue rewarded without ambiguity. Yet Snow White never turns preachy on the surface. It remains a series of events calibrated to produce a feeling, fear, then relief, then judgment. That's pedagogy by pulse. The brothers understood that sermons get ignored, shocks don't. They let the shocks teach the expected virtues. Work hard, obey warnings, honor elders, beware vanity. What nobody should miss is how the Grimms market-tested horror. Sales and criticism guided edits. Educators praised the collection's usefulness. Parents balked at gore. Wilhelm's pen answers, soften here, keep the core there. The cannibal meal stays early. Later, it's muted by phrasing, not removed. The stepmother locks in. Snow White's age drifts, sometimes unstated, sometimes implied older by tone alone. The story remains itself while wearing a cleaner coat. And yet they never turn folklore into pure decoration. A queen still eats what she thinks are organs. A child still becomes display. A court still bakes justice in iron. That stubbornness is the brothers' contribution to our mirror. They refuse to let comfort erase consequence. If innocence is threatened, the text will hurt the threat in public. If vanity drives harm, the ending will burn vanity into the floorboard. So the Grimms are not neutral librarians. They're editors with a mission: gather, Germanize, moralize, and endure. Their changes are quieter than Disney's, but just as decisive. They made sure the story could raise children to fit a world they hoped to build. Orderly homes, obedient bodies, punishments that stick, and a belief that danger lives at the threshold. This isn't just about one tale. It's about what we decide to feed children when we feed them culture. Chapter 13. Beauty, Bodies, and Control. Reading the symbols. The tale keeps saying fairest, but what it really builds is a system that watches bodies and ranks them. The mirror isn't magic glass, it's surveillance. It trains the queen to outsource her worth to a device that never sleeps. Ask, compare, adjust. That rhythm turns obsession into policy. It also turns Snow White into data, measured, named, hunted when the metric changes. A kingdom learns the lesson along with her. Authority comes from being looked at and liked, not from what you do. Beauty functions like currency and weapon at once. The queen spends hers to command rooms. When the supply runs low, she tries to acquire more the fastest way she knows. Consume the girl who has it. The lungs and liver aren't trophies. They're a theory of power. Eat youth, keep youth. Bind a child's body, keep your rank. Help comb her hair, slip poison in under the pretense of grooming. Beauty becomes the gate through which violence walks, looking like etiquette. Domestic space enforces it. The dwarf's house feels safe because it's neat, but neatness isn't neutral. Chores train her to keep surfaces perfect, to center other people's comfort, to be small, useful, quiet. Servitude for safety is a bargain written on her hands. The warning, don't open the door, protects her, but it also reproduces control. Stay inside, fear the knock, obey the rules laid out by men who leave all day. The threat lives outside, the labor lives inside. That split shapes her body into habit. Every object the queen chooses touches a different layer of identity. The bodice squeezes ribs until breath fails. Beauty standards turned into a literal chokehold. The comb glides where care lives on a head, that daily act of being tended transformed into a switch. The apple enters the mouth, crosses the threshold between public and private, and claims the space where speech starts. Mouths make sounds, yes, but also agreements. Put death there and consent collapses. The queen's genius is intimacy as weapon. The story's lesson is how easily culture supplies the tools. The glass coffin writes the next chapter in how bodies get used. It preserves her, but it also exposes her. She's displayed like a relic under clear walls, a small figure turned into public property. People come to look as if looking is devotion, and the dwarfs confuse guarding with exhibiting because they can't tell grief from praise anymore. Beauty is stabilized, then shared. Once you fix a girl as image, it's a short step to argue that whoever loves the image should carry it home. That's how the prince reads the scene. Not as a person paused, but as a possession paused, waiting for a rightful owner. He asks to take the coffin because seeing comforts him. In that frame, desire is divorced from the person who's supposed to be the point. The Kiss edit later patches this with romance, but the original leaves it plain. Love without participation is control with better lighting. She wakes into a plan already made for her, then chooses survival again. Punishment answers spectacle with spectacle. Iron shoes inside a wedding hall make justice into theater. The queen's body becomes the chalkboard where the court writes a warning. Heat answers hunger. Public watching replaces private eating. It's gruesome, but it's consistent with the world the mirror built. The gaze governs. When the queen owned the gaze, she weaponized it. When the hall claims the gaze, it burns her. The system never stops teaching with bodies. Underneath the plot beats, the symbols point to structures we still live with. The mirror is any metric that ranks faces and erases selves, today's algorithm in antique wood. The bodice is fashion that punishes breath. The comb is grooming culture that invites access to the head without asking. The apple is any sweet thing that gets inside because refusal feels rude. The coffin is the social feed that turns a person into a curated still life and counts attention as care. Even the dwarfs' rules read differently when you sit with them. Don't open the door is wise counsel in a tale like this, but it also normalizes fear as a lifestyle for girls. Hide, smile, clean, don't engage. Safety framed as silence. The story shows the cost. Rules save her twice, but they don't build a world where she's free. They build a bunker. That's why the ending has to stage judgment in public. Private precautions can't fix a public hierarchy. The queen's cannibal logic is obscene, but it's not random. It's the clearest version of something polite culture whispers. Consume youth to stay relevant. Copy it, buy it, inject it, eat it if you could. The tale doesn't theorize. It serves the scene hot from the pan. The body is resource. The powerful will harvest. If the harvest succeeds, the mirror smiles. If it fails, the kitchen learns new recipes. That hunger doesn't leave with the queen, it migrates. So the symbols don't sit still, they work. They show how control hides inside compliments, how danger borrows the voice of care, how labor is assigned as destiny, how looking becomes law. They also whisper why the happy ending stubbornly sticks in retellings. A kiss is easier than a system. A song is easier than a warning. A dance is easier than a trial. But the red shoes still glow at the edges, reminding anyone who looks long enough where the heat came from. Chapter 14. Why Disney bleaches the blood, commerce, and comfort. Jump to 1937, Lowe's Angels, where studios are betting that light can drown out a decade of darkness. The Depression has trained families to count pennies and avoid risk. Walt Disney wants them to spend on a night out and bring the kids. That goal shapes every frame. Horror is costly at the box office. Comfort sells popcorn. So the blade gets rounded, the blood rinsed, and the hard edges turned into songs you can hum on the way home. From the studio's perspective, this isn't betrayal, it's math. Feature-length animation is a gamble, so big bankers call it Disney's folly. Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, 1937, has to be safer than the source to reach families. To earn its keep, the film has to widen the door. Parents who grew up with iron shoes won't pay for new nightmares. They will, however, pay for a motherly princess, a funny set of dwarfs, a kiss that blesses desire, and a villain who vanishes without the smell of burned flesh hanging in the theater air. The edits track with the market. Age inflation makes the heroine dateable, not adoptable. A 7-year-old would force audiences to feel the danger instead of flirt with it, make her a young woman, and the romance can carry the emotional weight that Menace used to. The Huntsman scene keeps a tremor, then calms fast. Organs off the table. Cannibalism gone. The kitchen returns to pies, not proof. You can sell plush toys of a baker's helper. You can't sell a queen with a taste for lungs. Villainy gets stylized into spectacle that flares and evaporates. The queen drinks a potion, turns monstrous, falls from a cliff. Gravity does the justice so the audience doesn't have to. No lingering punishment. No crowd forced to watch pain as lesson. The moral lands softly. Vanity is bad, but you don't have to see how communities enforce that rule. Meanwhile, the mirror's surveillance is transformed into a catchy motif, stripped of politics and tuned to enchant. Music does heavy lifting. Songs cue feelings that the original text left raw. Whistle while you work turns servitude into cheerfulness, replacing contract with choreography. Someday my prince will come reframe suspended life as patient hope, not public display. The soundtrack lubricates swallowing edits you might otherwise choke on. You leave the theater humming, which is the opposite of leaving the book with a taste of iron and ash. Then there's the kiss, Disney's masterstroke of moral laundering. A stumble would look accidental, even absurd in a grand romantic arc. A kiss can be framed as care, a blessing, a sacrament that children can mimic with dolls. The physics of the apple disappears into a theology of love. True affection breaks curses. That's easier to market than a coffin jostle. it also keeps the prince heroic. Possession becomes proof of devotion when lips do what hands once did. Commerce shapes tone shot by shot. The dwarfs gain names and personalities because faces sell lunchboxes and personalities sell cereal gags. Fear is quarantined into a chase scene you can clap through. The palace gleams because escape should look like a product you might buy someday. Even the animals pitch in, cleaning to make domestic labor adorable. The message drifts. Work is fun, danger is brief, authority loves you. The larger pipeline runs clear, old-world cautionary tale to American fairy tale to global brand. The Grimms aimed at nation building, Disney aims at family building on screen and in the audience. Both pick and polish for purpose, but Disney's purpose has quarterly reports. If a beat scares 5-year-olds, it's cut. If it charms them, it stays. If it sells tickets and tiaras, it multiplies. That's why the blood vanishes and the glass thickens. What gets lost? The map of how harm travels. The queen's intimacy as weapon becomes villainy as vibe. Consent questions dissolve into choreography. Community complicity, those onlookers at the wedding, evaporates into a lightning strike. The story stops training kids to spot disguised danger and starts training them to expect rescue with a melody attached. Comfort replaces caution. And yet traces remain at the edges, like heat lines on cold glass. The mirror still whispers about ranking. The apple still tastes like a dare. Even softened, the plot remembers the skeleton underneath. Audiences feel it without naming it, which is why the tale keeps selling. It offers joy while hinting at a shadow you don't have to stare into. Disney bleaches the blood, sure. The stain's outline still shows through when the light hits just right. Chapter 15. The Afterlife of a Corpse, Modern Echoes and Rewrites. The glass coffin didn't stay in the forest. It got copied pixel by pixel until our screens became transparent boxes where faces lie still and strangers keep watch. Modern retellings walk straight into that glare. Horror writers strip the romance down to bone. The prince as collector, the coffin as freezer, the castle as kill room. Each version asks the same tight question: when does devotion cross into ownership? The answer keeps landing on the same floorboards the Grimms laid, only louder. Feminist rewrites pry apart the pose and the person. Snow White stops being a vessel and starts talking. She sues the prince. She prosecutes the coffin. She names the mirror, not as magic but as market, likes, follows, filters. In some versions, she refuses the revival bargain entirely, walking away from a life curated by the living who never asked her what she wanted. The apple turns into a contract ripped in half, the dwarfs into a union with rules that protect instead of pin. Meanwhile, true crime culture picks up the trail because the prince's plea, "Let me keep the body," isn't fiction in every decade. Cases surface where men turn grief into possession, where memorials become collections, where photographers hoard images of the dead like proof that they loved hardest. Watch how easily the language slips: shrine, keepsake, treasure. The coffin is a timeline you can scroll. The gaze keeps saying it cares while it never looks away. Consent discourse drags the kiss back into court. If she's unresponsive, what does a kiss do besides flatter the kisser? The original text never grants the prince that grace, which makes modern readers wonder how we ever did. In schools and scripts, the line tightens. Affection is not an override code. Snow White's breath returns by accident. Love doesn't excuse ignoring a body's silence. That's a boundary-setting script kids can actually use. Even fairy tales have to update their terms of service. The mirror has already updated itself without asking us. Algorithms rank faces now, not glass, chasing symmetry and youth and light like hungry saints. Filters file off what life adds, lines, shadows, time, and deliver a product we pretend is natural. The app becomes an oracle you check before stepping outside. Who's the fairest? It'll tell you in numbers. If the answer hurts, you'll buy. If it flatters, you'll keep asking. Surveillance never needed magic. It needed user retention. Influencer culture retools the dwarf's house into a studio. Whistle while you work morphs into batch content, tidy rooms as brand identity, servitude repackaged as that girl discipline. Don't open the door turns into don't read the comments. The boundary is still the plot device. The knock still arrives smiling. Sponsorships offer the comb. Brand deals promise the bodice. The apple shows up as a cleanse with evidence-based toxins you can't quite name. The psychology is identical. Compliance rituals disguised as self-improvement. Food keeps doing metaphorical work because hunger never left the tail. Eat the young isn't a joke, it's a business plan. Industries sell collagen like time dust, creams that drink skin, injectables branded as wellness. The Queen's Kitchen just scaled. Cannibalism got sanitized into skincare and the mirror approves. Variable reinforcement keeps buyers hooked. The next product might finally make the mirror say yes. A generation learns to call it self-care, while measuring its face against someone else's sponsored mourning. Rewrites push back by turning the coffin outward. In one version, the glass is a courtroom window, and the crowd has to watch systemic punishment, not a single woman's torment. In another, Snow White smashes the case herself, lungs burning with the effort, then sues the mirror manufacturer for damages. The point isn't revenge, it's jurisdiction. Who gets to frame a body, sell a story, declare a happy ending? If the answer is nobody asks the girl, the tale repeats. Scholars keep tugging at the mother versus stepmother thread because modern families know the truth the edits buried. Harm doesn't always come from outside the bloodline. Some adaptations restore the biological mother, not to indict motherhood, but to end the fantasy that lineage guarantees safety. Others make the queen corporate, a board that consumes youth by acquisition, so the villain carries a logo, not a crown. Same hunger, new uniform. Even comedy takes a swing. Parodies swap the prince's poem for a clipboard of non-disclosure agreements. Snow White signs, then refuses, then reads the fine print into the camera. We laugh because the absurdity feels accurate. The contract always arrives after the kiss. The release form always appears after the coffin moves. The paperwork comes to tidy what desire already did. Across genres, the same core keeps glowing. A body displayed invites a story someone else will tell. Resist that and you need new rules. Teach kids that the door isn't the only danger. The pedestal is too. Teach boys that wanting isn't a merit badge and care asks first. Teach girls that safety isn't the same as silence, and fairest is a trick word meant to keep you checking. The oldest detail holds steady like a warning light at the edge of the frame. Red-hot shoes, punishment as spectacle, cruelty mirrored back. Modern versions try to write gentler endings, but the heat keeps bleeding through because the system survived the queen. The mirror still says what sells. The apple still tastes like a dare. The coffin still promises an audience. We end where we started, at the shoes, because justice still wants to be seen, and so do we. What the mirror still says. Fairy tales don't lie. We sand them until the warning sounds like a lullaby. If you can't stop seeing the glass and the shoes now, that's the point. Want more true stories hiding under pop culture's gloss? Subscribe and queue up our next one on The Little Mermaid's original deal. See foam, knives, and a love that cuts. New episodes weekly. Tap follow, hit the bell, and watch the versions Disney won't film.